Welcome back, everyone, to the Unqualified Podcast. This is episode number 10,
Woo!
we think. Yeah, number 10.
Yay!
And the topic for today is reading. I guess I'll start us off just with kind of why we want to talk about this. I feel that reading is something that's become a bit of a lost art in modern day. I feel like even if you look at a lot of high school kids, most kids would take, like, even when they were younger, they're less willing to read rather than watch a movie.
Well, it's easier now with having an iPad
Exactly.
or something like that.
And what I've noticed is, like, I don't know if it's just how much effort it takes or how long you're reading, but the feeling of accomplishment and knowledge that you get from reading is just on a different level. Yeah. And also I find that the information is a lot more that you're getting is a lot more thought out than something like, for example, a quick 5-minute YouTube video. Like, you're really getting into the...
Well, it's because you have the time.
deep dive, yeah.
Yeah, it's not a 5 minutes worth of reading. It's hours upon hours, so it's worth it.
And I found that so along with doing the podcast, both me and Logan have kind of started working very heavily this year with being in quarantine on a lot of self-help and nutrition and wellness overall.
Becoming better, just in general.
It just in general, just becoming better. And I've found personally that reading has helped unlock, like, the most areas of growth, if that makes sense. I have been able to learn the most that I ever have about, like, what direction I want my life to go in and how I want to behave, and just maturing overall through reading and consistently reading this year. There's a great quote that a person who does not read good books has no advantage over a person who cannot read. It's Mark Twain.
It's a great quote.
It's a great quote, and I think it fully encompasses the idea of, like, just think about it, amount of people that haven't read a book, if you were asking last year how many books did you read, the amount of people that were like none or one.
Well, that's even me. I read maybe one.
I don't even
book.
think. I think I read like one, maybe two.
Yeah,
and that was like not real. I think most of it was through school as well.
Yeah. But see, the problem with that is when you're younger, especially. I'm just saying I'm younger, like I'm older now, but a lot of reading that you do is in school, so it's forced almost.
Yeah. Did you feel like that because it was forced, you were less willing to read?
Yes, 100%, because it became a chore.
Yeah, I feel like that's a lot of kids' mindsets these days. Is just in general, if you're told to do something, most of us are like, no. It's like, I think about the amount of times your parents, for kids, or if you have to remember, we're still kids, so first of all, that. But think about when you were a kid, if you're an adult listening to this, or if you're a kid, you can definitely relate to this. The amount of times your parents were like, do the dishes, and you were already thinking you should probably do the dishes, and in your mind you're like, no, I don't want to do it.
Just because you said it.
Just because you said it, now I'm upset that I have to do it. It's just this sort of act of defiance. It's
as well as it's not instant gratification.
Yeah, exactly.
I can read and spend a whole crap ton of time reading a book right now, or I can go on my phone and just scroll instead. And scrolling is going to give me that satisfaction right now.
Yes.
But I don't know. It's tough because you don't want to tell, because you go into this circle where I don't want to tell you, hey, you should read because you're not going to read then.
Yeah.
But then no one's going to get you reading.
Yeah, I think that it's, and I think for people, I think the biggest key to start reading is just find a book that you're interested in. It doesn't have to be a self-help book or a one about nonfiction. Pick up a fantasy book, maybe even one that you've read before, and just read every day. Yeah. And some people will be like, I can't read every day. I'm like, so you can't open the book and read like a paragraph every day. I'm not asking you to go out there and like finish half the book in one day. Just at the start, try to read every single day. And I feel like because I've been doing that, along with sort of with meditation and other things, I'm very disciplined in my reading.
Yeah.
There's a word we haven't used a lot. Discipline.
Well, you don't even have to read a book. If you read a magazine, granted, make sure it's a good magazine.
Yeah.
Let's not be reading garbage like Us Weekly or one of those other tabloid things. If you're reading a good magazine that's worthwhile, that's still reading. It's still processing information in a different way than you're used to. It's good for your brain.
Yeah, and that brings back to that quote about from Mark Twain about just choosing to read over, like, if you're not reading anything, you're no better than someone who can't read. And even if you're reading something like a magazine, you're still reading. So even though it might not be the most in-depth novel that'll change your life, it's a place to start.
And the purpose of saying that quote isn't to make you feel bad as a person if you aren't reading. It's to try and inspire you to read a little bit in a little bit of a weird way.
In a weird way,
we're a little messed up in the head. So But I wanted to ask you, because it kind of goes, we're circling through this point. Is what's the biggest mistake for you that you've made talking about reading, just in general?
Just talking about reading,
just talking about reading, and then we can go into about reading next. But talking about reading, because for me it was, I offered genres to people. Because I read self-help books and motivation books and this stuff, so, well...
And not everybody likes that.
It works for me, it must work for you, right? And I tried doing that, and the people I've seen that I've talked to the most, they started reading, but they don't read that stuff.
Yes.
And it just completely, made it awkward.
Yeah, no, I have to agree with you on that. I'll circle back in a second to what my biggest mistake has been, but in adding on to that, think about high school. I think the biggest thing with English that made it very difficult is all the books were on, like, they were like self-help books in a way. Like, they're like, you kind of have to pull a lot from it. Not self-help books, I shouldn't say, but there were lessons in the books they were teaching.
Yeah.
And in my mind, I was thinking, well, if I wanted to learn something from these books, I want to go straight to a self-help book. Like, I want to understand rather than having to go through the subtext. And it felt like a chore. Again, like a chore that I was trying to just dig through. But for some people, they learn best through these fictional stories. Stuff like Frankenstein, where it's like, who's the real monster? Or The Great Gatsby, talking about, like, rich and powerful and true happiness and that kind of thing.
It's a great movie. Sorry.
Oh yeah, well, and that actually is a book that I want to read, because now that I have a greater appreciation for reading, I want to approach it with seeing in a different light from being forced to do it in high school. But to begin with, I didn't need a book that was kind of in between. I was very used to, in high school, books that were very out there, like story-wise. You didn't really have to learn. You could shut your brain off and read. And then now I need these self-help books to really learn from it. Like, be clear in what you're saying, and I'll learn. But that being said, people are at different points in this reading spectrum, you can say.
Sure, yeah.
But bringing it back to what you asked, my biggest mistake when talking about reading, it is probably, I'd have to say, it's actually pretty similar to yours. And I think that's funny given the fact that I just rambled on already about it. But that
I don't
idea
think
of,
there's
like,
too many things you can go wrong with while reading, but it's like certain subjects where there's like 5 or 6 different opinions you can have, and that's it. So there isn't too much you can go on from that.
Yeah.
One of the things that I realized with, this is what you're talking about in high school and the chores and stuff like that, is I tried to read, and I only could read little bits at a time. And for, like, I don't know, a 4-month period, I'd read a whole bunch, but I'd only read 2 books, and I'd reread them 4 or 5 times because I loved those books. After that, I couldn't find a book I liked. I didn't figure out that I wanted to look at self-help genre. I still wasn't there looking for that kind of stuff. So I was on sports, and I couldn't find a sports book that I liked. And you just start going down this path. So I just decided, I'm not going to read right now. Which I wish I did read some more when I was younger. I just picked up a book and started reading. But then one thing I was going to say, which I guess I'll say it now, is the biggest mistake I've made reading myself, which was the next question I was going to ask you, is is finishing a book no matter what. I find that in the past with some of the books I've read, there's really great stuff in it, and reading through it took me a long time. However, I think if I had just looked at the chapters and gone from there and picked a chapter here and read it, or read half the book and go, I feel like I got what I needed out of this. I can pick this up later, keep a bookmark, fill the page, whatever it is. I think that would have benefited me. And also, my love for reading went down a little bit when I was forcing myself through a book. Because you're forcing, it's that chore again. You want to enjoy what you're doing, so you want to find something that works for you. And me forcing myself through a book wasn't something that I enjoyed. I think lots of people can do that because they feel bad. You pay for a book. I want to finish it because I paid for it, kind of thing.
You're going to laugh because mine is actually pretty much the polar opposite.
Oh.
And so this is where I think there's different types of people. Now, for you, it didn't work when you felt like you had to finish a book.
Yeah.
Right? You just, it was hard for you to keep going if you lost interest or something like that, and you're like, no, but you have to finish, and you kind of lost that love for reading. My thing not for having the love, but for just being consistent with my reading, which is at first what I found I had to do in order to refine that love. I had to just go from not cover to cover, obviously, but I had to finish these books because my biggest problem was my mind is like very new shiny thing, right?
The kids of ours.
Yeah, I get more excited. I'm a big comic book lover. I get more excited when I go out and buy a new comic than actually reading it because I'm like, wow, this comic is amazing. I'm going to love this. It's not that I don't love the stories. I love the stories, but that excitement of the new thing.
Instant gratification.
Yes, and a lot of it is like that. And it's something that's been developed, I think, just the way the world works with movies and TV. And it's like you just turn on your cell phone or you turn on the TV and you get this instant gratification. But that being said, I kept stopping. For example, the best example is this Dan Carter book that I have. I haven't actually gotten back around to reading it because I always get about halfway and I stop, and I wanted to get a few books under my belt before I go back to it. But what I found is I kept rereading parts that I had already read, and then I'd stop at about halfway, and I'd put it down for a bit because I'm like, this is boring.
Right.
You're not enjoying this.
Yeah.
And then I'd have to restart the process all over again. And I finally figured it out when I was reading Legacy by James Kerr. I was doing the same thing. I think I was on my second read through, and I was like, part of me was like, okay, just go back and restart. I was like, okay, if you do though, you can't stop. You gotta push through the parts that are boring, and then once you get to the parts that are new, you'll enjoy it. And so, opposite of what you said, I had to push through it.
So, it's interesting. So, it's almost like, it was like the meditation for you. Because I remember in the last episode, we talked about meditation, and you said that when doing the basics, you stopped meditating almost completely because you got bored redoing it all the time. And then you had that cycle. A two-part question, because you said a whole bunch of stuff there. Why did you stop reading? Was it...
Sometimes it's just like boredom, or it's like that, like I said, with a new shiny thing. Or when I was in school and I was reading, it was very easy to just, you already were reading at school. Why don't you just turn on the TV and watch something instead?
Right. Give yourself a break kind of thing.
Yeah. And also part of it was, I felt like my day was crammed with so much that the idea of trying to enjoy reading or focus on it was just taxing on my mind. Okay. I'd already and maybe that's something that I was just lazy with, but that's kind of what I felt.
It's funny because you just answered my next question. My next question was, what do you think limits people, what limits people from reading more? And I'm not talking about kids or people our age or adults, grandparents, whatever it might be. Do you think there's a thing? And you just kind of answered it with,
yes. If
you're working all day, for example, or you're school all day, well, I want a break now.
Well, it's the same thing with any other thing. Well, I should say any other wellness thing. Like meditation that we talk about, or fitness, or anything. It's like, my day's already so busy. and it's kind of this mindset that people have of, without hating on people, what I see and what I've experienced with myself personally is I was like, woe is me, my life is so hard, like all these people that are successful that are giving me advice, they're like, read more books and meditate and really focus on your fitness and your health. I was like, yeah, but you have the ideal lifestyle, like you can control every day. And I realized they got to where they are at now because they decided, well, no, I'm still going to make the time. Mm-hmm. Arnold Schwarzenegger, famously, he broke down his day in his speech. And I can't remember each point, but he talks about how every hour was just not wasted. And every hour of the 24 hours, like 6 hours he would sleep. And I don't totally agree with the sleep, but the amount of stuff he fit in while he was awake, like 2 workouts that are really long. He's going to school. He's taking acting classes. Like, he gave no excuses. He made the time. Yeah. So I think it's about making the time. Okay. And people are not always willing to do that, in my opinion.
Okay. Well, you said that the kind of thing where, well, these people, they're successful, they've read all these books, and you said, well, you have the lifestyle for it. And it kind of reminded me of, you're going to laugh a little bit, but Jiu-Jitsu, Jiu-Jitsu, a sport I do, and it's known for being a tougher sport where you might want to you want to have extremely good cardio, and something that limits people from starting it is they're afraid they're out of shape. And that goes straight to your point that you were saying that, well, no, you should just start and you'll get into shape. Don't wait to get into shape and then because you'll never get into good enough shape because you'll always be like, oh God, oh God, oh God. Just start.
Yes.
And life will take care of itself.
I think that's the thing that I find with
almost anything.
Almost anything. If you just take the time and go, I'm going to start. Once you've started, it's more difficult to stop almost.
Yeah. Fail forward fast.
Yes. Which is kind of contrary to what I said about reading, where I was like, I started but I couldn't finish.
Yeah, but if you just start reading a whole bunch, and I read a paragraph of this book, or a chapter of this book, didn't like it. This one, I like 2 chapters, this one. Like, you're failing. I don't know if it works exactly, but as long as you're doing something, even if it's wrong and it's not hurting you, I'm okay with it because you're making progress. Yeah.
There is one more other thing that I wanted to talk about.
Okay.
And I want to get your opinion. I hear a lot of people. One of the complaints I hear, which is weird because I don't think a lot of people have heard it, but I've heard it a lot recently. Yeah. Is, well, with everything that's going on in the world, what does that have to do with me? Like, what do these stories have to do with me? What do they have to do with connecting me? We heard it a lot in Shakespeare. Our teachers would say it consistently to us in English classes, at least in my experience. Yeah. They were constantly saying, like, these lessons still apply today. And I was like, you're joking. Like, you're kidding me. Yeah. Like, there's no way. That doesn't really work. Yeah. But no, really, one thing that I've learned is history repeats itself. And a lot of the times, I feel as though we can look to the past for answers. And one of the things I wanted to ask you is, do you agree with me in that sense that with reading books, we can relearn about our past and be more prepared moving forward?
100%.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't matter what you're reading. Most stories are based on, well, there's a principle to it, or there's a lesson involved in it, unless you're reading comic books or magazines or whatever.
And even then, sometimes they still have it.
Yeah. But almost no matter what you're reading, there's going to be something in it where it's like, oh, well, I can tell, even if it's something extremely childish, and you go, well, that person's an asshole in the book, where you go, okay, well, how does he act? Like, you can pick out little things no matter what.
Yes.
From that all the way to reading about history, of course, you can learn all that stuff. If you're learning about self-help books, even if they're back, let's say, 100 years ago from now, I don't know any books that are, but people are more or less the same. Yeah. Our problems in society change, but overall the same principle and reasoning and all that stuff stays the same. We're very basic people.
And this idea was actually, I learned about it through, I listened to a podcast myself called the Daily Stoic. Okay. And Stoicism is a philosophy that I really read into. And one of the things that the host, Ryan Holiday, talks about is, and this isn't sponsored, this is just saying, but what he talks about is how Marcus Aurelius, his meditations from years and years and years ago, are still relevant to everyday life now. Mm-hmm. Like his struggles with anger. We all deal with anger. His struggles with his vices. His struggles with power. His struggles with just the world around him and how he approached every single day. A lot of what he talks about is relevant today. Yeah. And this is true with most people that are talking about their lives, or like even years and years and years ago when they talk about these events. They obviously at the time, most of them aren't aware that this is going to apply years and years from now, like in our time. But usually it does. You can find a connection. It's like you said with those books, there's these lessons that you can pick out. Yeah. And I feel like people sometimes are lost to that idea. They don't try to take a lesson out. They just want to shut their minds off.
Well, people are... We like, especially today, we like to think that we're special and we're different than generations before us or generations to come. Mm-hmm. And that we're like the chosen generation or some other garbage all the time.
Like this is the best time to live.
It is theoretically all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
It is. But we're almost no different as humans. All we have is better technology around us and all that other stuff. Better homes, all that stuff. But as humans, we're the same people. We just have more around us in where we are living. So it's not that big of like a wow, this old thing is so different than me.
Yeah. And just speaking to that, I was actually reading The Subtle Art of Not Giving an F by Mark Manson.
It's a good one.
It's a really good one.
That's a recommendation.
That's a very big recommendation, especially because a lot of people are so focused on what others think of them. But back to my point, he talks about in the book how we kind of have this idea that we're like perfect or anything, or like that we're set in our beliefs and that we're not wrong. Well, you're less wrong than you were before. What he talks about is, and I'm probably butchering this, but you're less wrong than you were like 5 years from now. But your future self,
5 years ago.
Sorry, 5 years ago. Your future self 5 years from now is less wrong than you are now.
Like the Matthew McConaughey speech.
Yes, where he talks about his idol or role model is him 10 years from now.
And he'll never reach it. But you're always improving.
Yes, and it's this idea of mastery where it's not in mastering a task, it's in the pursuit of mastery.
Yeah.
And that can be applied to meditation, reading, fitness, your job, your relationships, just all of life. And one thing that I think that if people are wondering, like, what's the point of all this? What's the point of saying all this? Yeah. To bring it back in a weird way, all of these things that we're talking about, and I find this in every day, I'm learning more and more from books that I can apply and talk about it every day. I learned this just today, and I can talk about it. Yeah. I've had things on the podcast that I learned like a few days before that I talk about.
Yeah.
Conversations with other people, things that you learn, that you get from reading.
That's my favorite part is I was very close-minded growing up in political beliefs, religious beliefs, how I think the world turned around, what sports is best, anything. Mm-hmm. And reading the self-help books I've been reading at least, and I know others will give you different lessons, but I've had to become more open-minded or at least try to challenge my own beliefs. And I've realized that if you have a belief, no matter what it is, you should have it available to be challenged by anyone. Because you should be looking for the truth, which is what you're looking for.
And one of the big things that I think as well on that idea is constantly, what's the word? Being open to other people's opinions.
Right.
Constantly being open. Like, one of the things that I made this kind of idea to myself with starting reading again, I was like, okay, what you have to do is be open-minded to all these self-help books. Like, don't shut off any of their ideas. Be like, okay, well, that applies for this, not for that. Be open-minded to all ideas. And then once you've read these vast amount of books, like, those people who are very successful, they read so many books, and I bet you most of the books contradict each other.
100%.
But it's in the common themes that you can find and truly learn from. And the support given in these books, the research given in these books. I'm not saying any book's inherently wrong or just completely right. That's actually against the point of what I just made. It's that you have to keep looking for more information. You have to have this desire to learn more, and only then will you be less wrong, I said. And that's my opinion.
I know that all we just said just kind of got really intense into the whole thing after we just said that you should just pick up a book and try reading. And then we're going into all this stuff. But the point that I have been trying to keep focused in my mind with all of this is no matter what, whether it's you're going to gain a whole shit ton and you're going to become this enlightened person, or you just want to read a romance novel. You become a better person.
You learn, and that's the thing that I think is lost on a lot of people. For example, with TV and movies, you can learn a lot from them, but sometimes it's just funny sitcoms that you just shut your brain off for, or it's think about the amount of shows that you take in, but you don't actually learn from it. I can't think of a single book where I didn't come away what I really applied, where I was really thinking about it and I really tried to understand it, where I didn't come away learning something. And you can't always say the same about music, movies, TV. Sometimes you just want to shut your brain off. But I find that reading, because you have to pick up and read all 180 pages, you'll learn so much more.
I hope that's okay. I know that we kind of contradict ourselves a whole bunch there.
Yes.
But the point that we're trying to make is pick up a book, start reading. Don't care what genre it is. Don't care if it's a magazine, as long as it's a good magazine. Just pick up anything that's not on your screen, hopefully, and start reading. Stay away from the screen. Just start living a good life.
Yeah, just find something you're passionate about to start. Find a way to read about it.
I liked hockey. I started reading about hockey.
Yeah, I like rugby. I started with rugby books.
Yeah.
Find that. Learn from that. Just try and be consistent at the beginning, and in my experience, you will learn to love reading as we do.
Yeah. You will really enjoy it, I believe, if you just keep with it.
But anyways, guys, that's episode 10 of the Unqualified Podcast. If you enjoyed this, please let us know, and
share, subscribe.
Let your friends know. All support is good support, so we appreciate that. I hope you have a great day. Take care, guys.
Peace.